You're tuning in to Wellfound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am part of the product support and education team here at Wellfound. I'm really excited about today's session. We're going to be talking about behind the scenes of job search success, and this one's going to be a little bit different if you've come to Ask Recruiters before. We have Nathan Donato, who is our product manager for candidate tools here at Wellfound, and he's going to be sharing some platform data and insights to answer some of the questions that came up during the intake survey. So I'll introduce him a little bit more formally, not too formal, in just a little bit. But let me just talk about how this session is going to work. So for today, I'm going to intro what Wellfound is. I'm going to lead a short demo on job search and just a couple of tips for your profile on Wellfound and sort of job marketplaces in general. Then we're going to move on to questions. These are your questions from the intake form. So we did that so that Nathan had a chance to actually look up some of these things using Metabase and looking at the data that we have in Wellfound to see if we can accurately answer some of your questions about what makes a job search most effective. So he'll be answering those questions and supporting them. And then if we have time, we're going to move on to live questions. We're hoping that there'll be time, but to be honest, we might not get to it because this style is just a little bit different. And this is kind of the first session we're running in this way. But I'm going to send a full video recording to everybody after the session, either at the end of this week or early next week. And I'm also going to include extra resources in that, help articles, extra articles from people Nathan is going to mention, and anything else I think might help answer some of the questions that come up, even if we don't get to them. So stay tuned for that as well. And then for questions, you can type your questions in the chat. If you've got a question about how the Zoom is working, Alejandro and Megan are both in the chat. They're also from our team. If we get to the live Q&A, you can use the hand raise tool and I'll call on you to read your question out or say your question out loud. And the last call I have here is just to please be respectful. We're trying to build a community of job seekers so we feel supported. We're skill sharing. And so when it gets to questions, just be thoughtful about how long they are and just sort of keep that in mind. So just a first little note, this is presented by Wellfound. Wellfound is a jobs marketplace. It's been around for over 10 years. We were formerly called AngelList Talent, and we specialize in getting you hired by cutting edge startups. But of course, since it's been 10 years of growth, we also include enterprise and public jobs, or companies rather, looking for hiring people in the tech sector. So engineers, product managers, marketers, designers, and the like. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to optimize your profile. And to do that, I've invented a candidate here. We've got Lauren Olamina. This is a stock photo. But in theory, she's an engineering leader. She's got 10 years of experience. She wants to stay based in San Francisco and is open to remote, but she prefers on-site roles. So for her profile, she's built it out. And I want to talk a little bit about the differences between your resume and a profile in a jobs marketplace site like Wellfound or LinkedIn, and how it's important to kind of keep in mind what recruiters are seeing. So there's a couple of different ways that recruiters are going to view you. They're either going to view you because you've applied directly to a job, or they're going to view you because they are sourcing actively. And in either case, they're probably also using search terms to bring you up on their list and to sort of rank the people that are available to them in that system. And so because of that, it makes it really important that you fill out your profile in full. And I can't tell you how many people I get writing into support and saying, I've gotten no responses. What else can I do? And I look at their profile and it's missing 40% of the answers. So all of that data that happens in your profile is the primary thing that a lot of these platforms are using for search. It's getting more sophisticated with AI and other terms, and Nathan maybe can speak to that later. But right now, it's still very important that you're filling that out in full. So the first call here is just to make sure that you're filling out all aspects of a profile the best that you can and making sure to be putting in, especially your proficiencies, as far as your skills go. The other thing I want to focus on here is just how your actual profile looks to recruiters. So here on the left-hand side, you see an example, and the first two things that you see are this looking for section, which is really akin to like kind of a professional summary that you'd have at the top of a resume. And then underneath an achievement section that really is a highlight of the things that you've done, the impact that you've made. And I want to emphasize this because especially now that there's so many tools for matching your applications to the specific job posting, there's probably a lot of people that are going to show up as matching with what the recruiter is looking for. And so you need those extra sections to really highlight what makes you a special candidate. Do you make yourself clear that you are valuable to them and that they should get you on a screening call? So in these sections, you want to make sure you point out how you stand out, why you'd make a good fit, and explain what you want to do next. Like, what is it that you're looking for? And we've heard from numerous recruiters that this is really important to them. It's sort of like the top thing that they look at first. And then for your achievement section, you want to focus on probably things you've heard before, quantifying your impact. If it's measurable, if you can add metrics, add those in. And if you can't, think about not only what that project maybe achieved on like the primary level, but then think about it one more step where you think, okay, how did that add to the business? What was the greater thing that was supporting, and what did it lead to maybe 6 months out after it was developed? And add that in to sort of be more explanatory about the value that it added. So with that, I'm going to just pop out and actually show you how to check this out in your profile. So I'm logged in as Lauren right now. And you can see the way that your profile looks to recruiters on this page. So if you go to profile on your left-hand side here, and then you go to overview, you can actually see how your profile looks. And this is, even though you've got your resume, even if it's perfectly filled out, this is what they're going to see first. So try to wipe your brain, after you've done all these edits and you've been so deep in your resume, and pretend that you're looking at this fresh and you've just looked at 20 resumes that are kind of going over something similar, and think, does this stand out? And if it can't, think about how you can maybe do that. And then the only other things about the profile that I wanted to mention was, just fill out all the different sections. It's not just your profile page. I sort of wish this was titled a little differently in our system, but also your preferences and culture page make up what you're seeing on the overview. So make sure to go through this entire area. And then the other part is that for some of you, not all of you, we have a beta tool called AI Interview, which is more like a recruiter screening interview. It asks you general questions that can give a preview to who you are as a candidate. And if this is available to you, I highly recommend trying it out and adding it to your profile, because when someone's skimming through all these different profiles that have applied to a job, having this for an extra piece of information for them to engage with is actually going to give you a lot of extra edge right now. And you can re-record it over and over again. And if you have any problems, let us know, because it is in beta. But it's going to be released to everybody as far as I know. Maybe Nathan will correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll be able to, everyone will have this available to them eventually. Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to go over is just about job searching. So I'm going to talk about, Nathan is involved with Raven, which some of you, I know if we've got any repeat people, some of you have already tried out Raven and have seen its value. So that's like a different kind of job search. And some of that is going to come into our core platform, but I'm just going to talk about how the job search functions now so that we can, help you in this moment that you're searching for jobs. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about if Lauren is setting up an ideal search. I meant to erase some of these things. So I want to show first what Lauren would search for probably right off the bat. So she said that she wanted on-site roles in San Francisco, and she wanted a role in engineering managing, or as an engineering manager rather. And when we do that and we have all the other filters filled out here, she gets a sort of limited amount of results. So also I'm going to add in healthcare and education were the two other things that she was looking for. So now we only have 4 results, which is actually maybe fine for someone like Lauren. She's looking for a management position. And maybe she really wants to focus on a role. Maybe she's not desperate for her next position. And this would work for her. But if she's in an active job search, she may want more options. So I want to talk a little bit about what she can do to open it up. So the first thing that I recommend that she does is add more of those primary job roles. And that goes into this field here. So I would start with just software engineer. It's it's totally possible that someone's written a job post and put it as software engineer and then written in the job description that's a management role. And so with that, I'd also add any other overlapping engineering positions here as well. And I'm just going to add front end as well. So that's the first thing I would do. And you can see we already got a couple other options here. The other thing that I would do, and a lot of people don't think of this, is that, and this, I don't know if this is the same for other jobs websites, but we've put in San Francisco and San Francisco Bay Area, which are those exact locations. But there's lots of places that she could commute to from San Francisco that she might be open to. So we could add Berkeley, there you go, Oakland. And if she really wanted to expand her search to even just like places she'd be comfortable working hybrid, she could just add California in general to open this up. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that except for your primary role positions and for locations, most of the other filters here are or categories. So it's going to show you anything that matches one of these items. So Lauren wanted a role in healthcare and education, but there's actually like a bunch of markets here, like wellness, that she could be adding, that might be adding to her search as well. That's added too. And she can go through this and really try to be thorough to try to capture those all. But if you're finding that when you put in some of these things that it's a little bit too strict, just clearing a whole section might actually open up quite a lot of roles that are worth, actually manually reviewing. And I think markets is one of those filters in our system that helps you open it up. Whereas for skills, I would probably take the opposite approach. I would try to be as thorough here with what you're proficient in as possible, because those can like really limit whether or not you can see yourself working in the role, because your tech stack might be really important to you. So those are just some things that you can assess while going through this that maybe are going to help open up a job search for you while still keeping it relevant. Of course, you want it to still be applicable for what you're looking for. And then the last tip that I have here is just to consider putting on a job search alert. Nathan, I know, has a data stat on this, but applying early to jobs really makes an impact. So definitely put on a job search alert. You're going to get emails as long as your notifications are on, which are in your settings in the top right here. And that will allow you to hear about these jobs as soon as possible to get your application in as quickly as you can. And you can also set up multiple tabs here. So you can set up like, for example, maybe she wants to set up basically the same search, but have it as remote jobs for United States and just kind of keep them separate. She's got separate lists, and she can kind of look at her options and kind of quantify what's out there. So I hope that that's helpful. Let me go back here. I think those are most of the things that I wanted to go over. I might skip over these highlights, but basically, the real call here is to keep in mind how a recruiter is going to view your profile. Think about making sure that you've been really thorough with those sections. And then really the job search, the job search recommendations are to play with your job search. I think that's like the best thing I can leave you with, is to try to play with it and definitely to make up those job search alerts so that you're applying early for the most impact. Okay, great. Now I can stop talking as much and I can introduce Nathan. Nathan is a product manager here, and he brings a unique insider's perspective to job search effectiveness. He spent over 3 years at Wellfound, and he's worked both as a senior software engineer and a product manager. And he's currently leading the rebuild of our platform's job search functionality, which I mentioned earlier. So he's been deep diving into the data behind what actually works for candidates. So thank you so much for being with us, Nathan.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you the first two questions that we have here, and they're about what drives success. How many people are actually applying to well-found positions? And then what drives the highest conversion rate for getting a call back?
Great question. So for these, I created a little dashboard for this. It's going to be publicly available. We're going to be able to link it out. You can play with it and limit your results by location, role bucket, that sort of thing. And if anyone has any questions that are not answered here, I plan to add to this as much as I can and just kind of treat it as like a living dashboard of insights for candidates. So just let me know. So I think the first question there was like how many jobs are being or how many applicants are applying to each job on Wellfound. So I have a section up here that's just kind of like state of the market. Let's see how many jobs are being posted, how many, the median number of applicants per job listing. And so that number's here. So I think like as of last week, it was a median of 40, around 41 applicants per job. I hope that helps. Granted that like I just want to say keep in mind a preface here is like all the data I'm showing you is just on Wellfound, and I'm looking primarily in the last 6 months so that it has recency, so that we're up to date with the current market. So like these people, these companies might be getting applicants from other places wherever they're posting. Like I'm not, I know that Wellfound exists in an ecosystem. I know we're not the only site you use. We're not the only site that recruiters use. So just keep that in mind. Like I can give you the data about Wellfound, and some of it, you know, you can extrapolate to be about job search in general and platforms in the market in general, but some of it is, you know, just keep that in mind. So yeah, just feel free to get in here. You can group this by location and role, remote only, and play around with these things. The next question was like, what impacts an application being accepted? So I tried to pull like there were several questions here, specific things. So I tried to pull some data on those things. Let's first like talk about how to read these charts. So the main metric I'm looking at here is what we call here at Wellfound match rate, which is specifically when talking about job applications, which is how many, what percentage of job applications are accepted by the company. We don't track hires or offers on Wellfound, so we can look at match rate. I actually think match rate is a pretty compelling thing to look at because it allows you to isolate, you know, the application moment and kind of exclude things like interviewing from as a confounding variable. Those things are very, very important, but I just want to make it clear that I'm talking about getting an application accepted and what goes into that. And again, I'll mention this is from the last 6 months, so they were more recent. And again, if you have more things that you want to see that I don't go over, please feel free to ask them and we can add them. How to interpret these charts. I want to point out, like, you're going to see these numbers are very, very small. These match rates are very, very small, and it might be alarming. It's like, oh, I knew it. You know, I knew that match rates were very low. And that's true. Like, I don't want to I need like let's just tell it straight. Like this is a pretty rough market. I think you've all felt it. We feel it here. It is a very, very strong employers market. What do I mean by that? Is like the market ebbs and flows. I think when I first joined here, it was more of a candidates market, which means candidates have more power. Companies were scrambling for candidates, and now it's more the reverse. There's a lot of competition. Um, a lot of candidates gunning for all the same roles and jobs are seeing, you know, because I said the median is like 41 right now on Wellfound, but it's not unheard of. Like I've talked to companies who don't just use Wellfound, they're getting hundreds, thousands of applications, which I'm sure a lot of you already know and a lot have felt. So when you look at these match rate numbers, they look very, very low. I'll just do a quick shout out that like someone, I forget the exact org, did an analysis of a bunch of different job boards and Wellfound was like number two in terms of match rate. It's like an average of 5% accepted. It sounds really low, I know, but it is lower elsewhere. So don't, not trying to scare you away with these numbers not to use Wellfound. It's actually the opposite. They're pretty good. But this isn't an ad to use Wellfound. I'm just trying to be helpful here, but I just wanted to preface that. So when you're looking at these match rates and you see these numbers, they're very low. I'm going to show you differences between numbers and you're gonna be like, that's not a big difference because you'll see a match rate that's like 5% and then you'll see one that's 6% and you'll say, what's the difference? Well, the difference there is actually 20%. That's a 20% lift. So it is low. And I hope, you know, a story here I think will unfold as I go further, but I just wanted to preface that of like keep in mind the difference between two numbers. And so let's start first. Everyone knows, and I think I hear this a lot of like apply early. And I just wanted to pull that data to see the effect of job age on match rate. So I have it bucketed here, like 1 day old, within the first day, 2 to 3 days old, a week, 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, it does decline as the job gets older. Your strongest chances are early, within the first few days. The median match rate is 8.56% on the first day, down to 7.65% in the first 3 days. Um, but I think what's really important to show here is that it doesn't go to zero. There is an assumption, I think, that like if you see a job that's 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, a month old, it's like it's not even worth my time. And it's true that it's lower. Once you get to up to a month old, it goes to 4.64%. That's not that bad comparatively. Yeah, it's like half, but it doesn't mean it's not worth it. So if you see a job that's like old, that you think is old, and you're like, it's not worth my time, it actually could be. So we actually have an indicator on Wellfound that shows if a recruiter has processed an application for a role. So maybe use that as a clue. But again, you can apply this more widely. It's not just about Wellfound. It's like if you see a job, it's a little older, shoot your shot. It's probably fine. I hear a lot about remote versus on-site. Like on-site roles have a better match rate. It's not worth applying to remote roles. That doesn't seem to be true on Wellphone in the last 6 months. Remote roles have a higher match rate. Again, this is just Wellfound. I don't know about more widely, but I'm just saying like it's probably worth your time to apply to remote roles if that's really what you want. Um, Apply to on-site roles too, but yeah, it's worth applying to. Okay, let's talk about like your profile and stuff. Someone asked, why do I have to supply my LinkedIn link? Why do I have to fill out my profile? This type of thing. So let's talk about LinkedIn first. What did, so let's just talk about the effect first. It's like there is a slight lift here and it varies by location. I had whittled this down to US engineering and like the difference is much bigger. It's more important to have a LinkedIn if you're an engineer in the US. And I don't know, we would have to cut it down and analyze different locations and roles to see where it doesn't matter that much. But it's not a huge lift. Why though? Why do companies want this? You go on and you provide your resume. Why do they also need your LinkedIn? Well, it's simply just like social proof. They want to get a sense that you're a real person. They want to get a sense of that your company's a real company, that you have real connections, and they can click through to see the company information if they're not familiar with your company. And that's very important, actually. So it's worth it. Just toss it in there, fill it out, fill out your LinkedIn, fill out your Wellfound profile too. I know it's a pain. I know it is, but it does have an impact, even if it seems small. So Rachel had already touched on this a little bit, which is the effect of filling out your profile on match rate. Um, so this is where I was talking about like numbers may seem small, but they're actually pretty significant. Is like if you're missing basic information, which is like skills, years of experience, etc., match rate is 4.83%. And then it goes up as you fill out more information. So filling out skills, years, and experience. Why? Because we have keyword matching, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. On the recruiter side, they are sorting applicants based on skills, years of experience, etc., right? And then it goes even further if you have a profile picture and a resume. The reason these are bucketed like this is because they're bucketed in terms of profile completion. So I don't have the granularity of like profile picture and resume individually, but like in buckets. That's why they're bucketed like that. Sorry, I'll try to get it more granular, but this is the easiest way to query it. But basically is like, okay, resume makes sense, right? Some recruiters prefer to read the resume, honestly. But having a profile picture kind of gives them a sense that maybe you're a real person. And I want to call this out. Like this may be not surprising to anyone. I don't know. But I wanted to call it out just to be very, very transparent and honest that like once you fill out your culture preferences and salary, match rate starts to go down just a smidge, just a little, but it does go down a little bit. And why could that be? Well, it's because you might not, the culture you say you want, like in the example candidate Rachel had, is like, oh, I'm ideally looking for healthcare and education. That type of thing will really help if you're applying to a healthcare education role. But if you're not, it might hurt you. And I just want to call that out that like that's a real thing and just be honest about that. Um, Okay, someone asked about cover letters. This one I think is pretty interesting. When I say cover letter, I'm looking at on Wellfound, we added a default question to jobs, which is what interests you about working at this company? The reason my team added that a couple years ago is because we talked to recruiters and they love when candidates were applying, rather than saying like, oh, I'm such a good fit because of XYZ, they preferred if candidates said why they were interested in this role in particular. So that's why we changed the wording there. So that's what I mean when I talk about cover letter. So let's look at the difference. If you have like no cover letter at all, if it's optional, right? You don't do it versus a generic cover letter. And by what I mean by that is like not specifically targeted towards this company or this job in particular. It's about the same. Just skip it, honestly. But if you mention their product, if you mention the company's name, if you mention the mission, if you convey excitement, suddenly it starts to go up. And this is where I'm talking about like 6.55% match rate versus 5.39 is a bigger difference than it seems. That's like 21% or something like that. That means you're increasing your chances by 21%. That's not nothing. However, it's still small, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit later. It's like, don't get discouraged if you do all this work and you're still not hearing back. It doesn't mean it's not effective. The data shows it is effective, but there's still a lot of applicants, right? It's still very, very competitive, and that's a reality, but it doesn't mean it's not worth it. Let's talk about this one over here on the left, which I think is really, really important. I queried for candidates who apply to jobs and just keep applying without ever updating their profile versus candidates who apply and then update their profile and then apply again. You can see the difference between these two numbers is pretty big just by the visualization of the chart. What this means is if you try and fail, update something, try something else. Qualitatively, like I talked to this candidate who Rachel had mentioned we're building a product called Raven. It's an AI product. And the guy was like, I don't really need it because what it did is it helps people find roles that they're a good fit for. And he was like, because it's supposed to help people get more interviews. And he said, I don't need this because I don't need help getting interviews. I get interviews where he's having trouble is getting offers, like passing the interviews. So I asked him, I was like, okay, well, like, what do you do? Because I want to learn from him. What makes you so successful? And what he does is he takes a data-driven approach to job search where he will just try different things, A/B tests, so to speak, of like, okay, on this one, I'm going to put a personal statement at the top, and on these ones, I'm not. So like, 25 applications here, 25 applications here, see what works. Maybe try a different format or something. Just see what works for him. And then use that to sort of educate the rest of his process moving forward. And so I think that's a really, really important learning is like like I'm showing you this data. This is about everybody. This is about people of all different backgrounds, of all different experiences, all different roles even, right? While you're like part of this system, like you're still, and you can learn from these takes, I think, from this data, you're still like an individual. So the most important thing to do is, yeah, seek out data, go to these webinars, learn from recruiters, learn from whoever, but also like create your own data points because no one is the same as you other than you. So just iterate, try different things, see what makes a difference. Now, finally, like I want to show you this chart down here. Um, we've been talking about match rate and like these numbers are small. It really means like 6% of these applications, 6.5% of these applications get accepted. That's not a lot, 5%. That means 95% do not. And I'm not gonna lie, like that's depressing, right? It sounds depressing, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, I swear, because yes, doing these quality things helps. 20% lift here, 15% lift here, whatever. It does help. It really does. The data shows it helps. But what makes a big difference more than anything is persistence and perseverance. That's what this chart down here shows. So what I'm trying to show here is I'm looking at candidates who have at least one match. They got an interview, a phone screen with at least one company. How many jobs did they apply to? So I'm bucketing this into, so candidates who apply to one job and then peaced out, they just bounced. Only 5.8% of them have a match. But as they apply more and more and more and more, it gets up to, if you apply to 100 plus jobs on Wellfound, 98.7% of those candidates have at least a match. So what does this mean? Like it sucks. It's a numbers game. 100 jobs, really? I have to apply to 100 jobs? I know. I wish it weren't true. We're trying to fix it, we're trying to make these types of things better and easier. But in terms of what works for job search now, yes, these quality things work, but quantity too. That's just a fact. Um, so yeah, I hope that's helpful. I'm going to stop sharing now and I'm going to talk about a couple more of these things that are more qualitative. So someone asked about keyword search, if it matters to actually like put keywords into your resume or not, or your profile. I tried to pull this beforehand. I wasn't able to get the data. I'm going to try to get it on that dashboard. But the answer is yes. because the way it works is imagine you are a recruiter with hundreds or thousands of applications. You don't have time to interview all of them. So you're going to go through your list and you're only going to schedule a few to fill your calendar because there's only so many hours in a day. So how do you make sure that you're getting the best candidates first, right? You're going to use some sort of sorting. Keyword is the main one, the one that's been around before AI, keyword search. So yes, it does make an impact. I will say you don't have to be an exact match. The last time I looked at this, most candidates, most accepted applications were just partial matches. So you don't have to be 100%, but you do need to match. It is important. I will say, be careful of too many though. People, that can be a red flag is like, okay, I'm an engineer. I know Rails, React, Python. I know every single front end library under the sun. I even saw someone put jQuery in there, so which is like it's not relevant anymore. So unless the job actually wants jQuery, why even bother? Because what it does is it makes it look like, okay, I can't tell as a recruiter what you're an expert in. And then the last one I'll say is this one's more qualitative. I learned from a recruiter that the personal statement, that's like the thing at the top of your resume, I always thought, like I always assumed like, it doesn't matter. There's keyword search. They're just going to look at your profile. They don't care about that. That's actually really, really important. Why? Because recruiters do scan and they only spend a few seconds on a resume. I'm not going to lie. They only spend a few seconds. So putting front loading the most important information at the top is really, really huge. And so you can take things like important metrics. So if it's like a job about scaling, like it seems important for this job to do things at scale, you might want to float a metric from in your resume up there about how you brought something to scale, right? Same thing as like maybe it's an industry thing. They're a fintech company or something. You can say there that you are an experienced fintech customer success manager or something, right? Like so that is an opportunity to plug in keywords towards the top and numbers to grab their attention, but also just sell yourself as a really, really, really good fit. Um, yeah. So qualitatively, those that helps. I think that does it for that. And again, if you have more, throw them in there. I'm gonna get them and I'm gonna try to add them to that dashboard after this in the next, few days.
Awesome, Nathan. We did have some requests for other pieces of information, so I'll make sure to get that to you after the call to see if we can add them.
Cool.
That was super helpful. And I even have questions. I'm sure other people do, but we can move on to these next questions to see what comes out of it. So the next questions that we have are about AI reality checks. So Angelica asks, what makes a candidate stand out in the age of AI assisted recruiting that auto rejects thousands of candidates? And we were kind of excited to answer this question, weren't we?
Yeah, I was excited to answer this. So, like, I'm not gonna, it's probably true that companies are auto rejecting candidates with AI, but every company that I've talked to is not doing this. Um, every company I talk to says, no, we don't use AI to auto reject. Either they're not using AI at all, they're still on these legacy keyword systems, or they use AI simply for sorting. So it's like it's false that they're not auto rejecting, but it's false in a nuanced way. And let me unpack it a little bit further. So ATSs and job boards, they do have the concept of what's called a knockout question. Maybe you guys have heard of this. So you might be answering a question in the application and you answer a certain way and it excludes you, it auto rejects you. That's a thing. That's always been a thing though. It's not new. It's been a thing. I started my career in tech at an ATS. And it was a thing then. That was like 11 years ago. It was probably a thing way before. It's always been a thing. So it's true that there are knockout questions. We have one on Wellfound, and that is if you require visa sponsorship and the company can't or is unwilling to sponsor visa sponsorship, it will just auto reject you. Um, which is unfortunate. I wish everyone could sponsor visas, but it's not always possible. So that's the only one we have on Wellfound. And we don't have any AI that auto rejects on Wellfound. And most companies, using their ATSs are not auto rejecting, but they are using it for sorting. The same way I mentioned the keyword thing, AI is being used the same way. Um, so the AI will basically look for a lot of the same things. They'll look for keywords, but also like qualities, right? Maybe it's a job title, maybe it's having done something like mentorship experience or something like that, right? Kind of hard to tell exactly. Some of these things are very fuzzy and not easy to tell with keywords. So they'll ask the AI, the AI will read the entire resume and then it'll say, okay, check or not check. And they use that for sorting. So again, it's not new because they've always done keyword search, right? Boolean search, they call it. But so I say, it's easy for me to say, oh, they're not auto rejecting you, but in effect, it kind of is, right? Because of what I described before, which is like recruiters have hundreds or thousands of applicants. They only have so much time to fill up in their calendar. So they're going to sort it and they're going to go through, they're going to read it. They skim, but they read the resumes. Um, they're going to look at the ones that look good and they're going to just move on from there, really, because they might have five roles. They got the next role to think about. But bottom line, I think, is that recruiters are, of course, using AI, as most industries are. It's used for sorting, but I don't think it should scare you that much because I think it's better than keyword search because of the fuzziness. You might say, because a recruiter might say, oh, the hiring manager said they can know any modern front end framework, right? They could list those out as keywords. Maybe they spell React JS with a dot between React and JS. If you don't have it with a dot, suddenly you don't have the keyword, right? But an AI could just be very, very much more fuzzy. It could say, oh, you said modern front-end framework, they have Vue. So you meet that criteria, right? Same thing with job titles. You might not have the job title of a tech lead, but if the AI reads your experience and you've done tech lead things, you fit that criteria. Um, yeah, so I hope that helps. I hope that answers that question.
I think it definitely does. The inferring that AI can do is really powerful. Like I've used some of these tools and we've had other recruiters talk about them, and it actually might make up for some of the things that you've missed in that matching. And that's a really helpful thing to have as a takeaway, I think. Shay asks a question about how can I use AI effectively, presumably in their job search and applications.
Totally. Great question. If you're not using AI, you should, but to a limit, and I'll explain why. So first of all, someone else asked about like cutting through the noise of like which job should I apply to or which I shouldn't. So you can use AI tools like Raven is one of these, but again, it's not available for everyone yet. There's other tools out there. There's competitors. You can use those. Or you could just go into ChatGPT, paste the job description, paste your resume and say, is it worth applying to this job or not? Right? If it is, what am I missing from my resume? Use it as an aid to help you determine if you should apply to a job or not, right? And if you do, how can you bolster your resume with more keywords or something like that, right? I'll also say helping you generate cover letters or answers to questions is fine, but the operative word there is help because um, recruiters, as hypocritical as it might seem, because I just told you they're using AI to sort, right? As hypocritical as it might seem, the reality is they have the power in this market. And so they have the power to be choosy. And if a candidate is using AI and it's noticeable to answer questions, then that kind of, not for every recruiter, just to be clear, like I'm kind of generalizing here of general trends I'm noticing, but they will say, oh, this candidate used AI. They're not that serious about my role in particular. I'm not interested. There was a post on LinkedIn where someone had posted a job, it was a PM role, and it was like, I don't even know, 90% of them were AI applications. And the way they were able to tell this is they noticed a pattern in this one question they asked. All of them were starting the same exact way with some string. And they noted, they were like, what could this possibly be? So they actually went themselves, used one of these AI tools, plugged in the question and said, generate an answer for this. And that was their, then they found the culprit, right? It was that AI tool. So what can you do instead? I'd say it's very, very, very helpful to use AI to help generate this stuff because it's hard, right, to come up with these things yourself. Use it as a starting point. Plug it in, say, hey, generate a little cover letter for me for this, and then edit it to make it sound more like you. Another way you could do it is ask ChatGPT to do that, but provide it your own writing as samples to say, hey, match my own style. And that can help it make sound more like you. But I just say, like, use it as a co-pilot, not as an autopilot. I'm not gonna lie, if you want to do that, if you want to use AI to just mass apply to things, it's fine. It'll probably work. You'll probably get responses, right? Because volume, it's a numbers game. And you play the numbers game, you're bound to encounter a company that's like, that's fine. I don't care. This person looks good. So it totally works. But what I will say is like you're probably leaving matches on the table if you do that because of the people who are rubbed the wrong way by that. And the data shows that, being a little more taking a little more time having a quality application does help. So, just try to, I think the best way to do it is speed yourself up, but keep it personal is probably the best middle of the road, sort of best of both worlds.
Awesome. Yeah, that seems very much in line with other recruiters that we've had on calls like this too, for kind of best practices. Um, I'm also excited to ask this question. So this is kind of about breaking down assumptions. Ashish asked, what are the assumptions versus reality between job seekers and employers? So what are some of the things we can break down a little bit here?
Yeah, I mean, well, piggybacking off of the last thing, the companies, a lot of companies, I see a lot of noise about this on LinkedIn and on Reddit and stuff. The candidates who use AI aren't serious and aren't actually interested in their company and they perceive them to be spam or something. And like, it's not fair, right? Like you saw the match rate, 5% acceptance rate for applications. Like, do you blame candidates for using AI to get an edge, right? So I just want to call that out. It's not a fair assumption, but it is assumption they have, and a lot of recruiters understand, no doubt, but a lot don't, right? And when they have hundreds of thousands of applicants, they're looking for any reason to say no, unfortunately. Another one I'll mention is that candidates, uh, they assume that the companies the candidate has worked for in the past are the strongest signal for the candidate's quality. So we hear this a lot of like people with bang experience do best, which is true. It just might mean if you don't have that, you might need to work a little bit harder. Maybe like I haven't tested this myself, but like even just like recognizing what a company is can help. So maybe a link to the company's LinkedIn or something like that might help. Maybe in your personal statement, saying where you currently work, what does that company do? Like maybe what stage. If you're applying to a startup, you work at a startup, it's a very similar environment. Maybe just mentioning that, why it's similar, right? Um, might help skirt around that. Um, in terms of like candidate assumptions, what candidates assume versus reality, I think a lot of candidates assume recruiters don't read resumes. They skim them, but they do read them. So again, like front loading the most important information at the top is important. Using metrics and numbers is important to catch their eye. It helps show how you've had an impact. Rachel mentioned this earlier, but it also can just help contextualize things like if you're applying to a company that's like a scale stage and you worked at something that's a high scale, like saying you worked on an app that supported 5 million users or something, right? It's probably helpful context and numbers do grab their eye. Um, a big one, I think this is really important. If anyone's tuning out, I would just like tune back in real quick, which is that being a good fit and personalizing your application, like the two things we've talked about, assuming that those are all that matters, because it's not. Timing matters and luck matters. Because I mentioned recruiters work, they sort of get their short list and then they move on. They mentally reset. That being said, our data showed earlier that like after a month, people are still getting matches. How can that be? Because hiring works in waves, from what I've found. So applying early kind of helps you more guarantee that you get in that first wave, right? But if you catch them in another wave, maybe they met with 10 candidates, they didn't like them, they come back for more. Um, maybe you catch them there, right? So that's why I think to me, the takeaway is that like quality and quantity both matter. Personalizing your application is good, but you have to also hedge your bets and make a play for the quantity. And a big part of that, I think, is this timing and luck. Um, yeah, I think a couple more I mentioned is that like side projects, a lot of candidates think just like especially junior candidates, right? Like all you've done is like school projects or something. Throwing that on there will help you. Not necessarily. It might, but usually doesn't. Because companies want to know that you have some sort of like production like um, experience. So what I would suggest is if you are currently doing side projects or something, what you can do is um, put it out there for users to actually use, right? Suddenly it's not a side project. Suddenly it's a real thing that real people use. If you're a game developer, for example, rather than just like making games and like stashing them on your computer, do a mod for a game instead and get users' feedback and iterate on it so you can talk about that sort of thing. Same thing with certifications. Like certifications are really good, a really good way to learn, but it's not a really good way to sell that you know the thing. Try to put that into practice in some meaningful way that actually is, maybe you even start your own business or just for fun, get users on. It's kind of tricky. It's a really tricky spot to be in. I will say that people assume that customization and taking your time with applications is pointless because, as we saw, like you can spend your time on a cover letter and it moves that 21.5% better chance, but it's still not a guarantee, right? So what I've found talking to candidates is they'll spend like a week doing that, not get any results and be like, screw this. This isn't worth my time. It is. The data shows that it is, and you just got to keep going because, it does make a difference, but it's not the only thing that makes a difference. And the thing that makes the biggest difference is perseverance and keep going and hedging your bets. And then finally, I'd say a lot of candidates in the same way think networking is pointless. They'll reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn, reach out to hiring managers, reach out to possible peers, try to ask a question, try to introduce themselves, and not hear back. It's not pointless, for the same reason. It's like it didn't work then, but it probably could work. And as long as you do it in the right way. And so I think that leads us into the final slide, actually, is like about the value of reaching out. So if you want to talk about that, Rachel.
Sure. Sorry, I had muted myself. Yeah, those are all great things to emphasize, and I love that call for just, you know, that these things have impact, but also that persistence, that has impact too, to keep going. Don't give up. But the value of reaching out is something that's come up on a lot of our Ask a Recruiter calls. And I can't speak definitively to it, but I can talk about a couple of resources that you might be wanting to check out. Just our last Ask a Recruiter was with Lachlan Ma, who talked a lot about different best practices for how to reach out, especially on LinkedIn. He had some really good tips about how to, you know, it's sort of similar to what you're talking about with placing those most important value points at the top of your resume. Doing the same when you're reaching out to someone. Don't tell them what your name is or where you're from. Tell them exactly, I do this kind of work and this is the value that I add, and that might be the way to hook them in. So he had a lot of really good tips for that. So I highly recommend watching it, and I'll put it into our follow-up email as well. Um, and then we had another really great call from Carmen, and she is like a veteran recruiter who talked about how basically all recruiters have told us this, that referrals almost guarantee that you're at least going to get that first screening call. And that feels like a very important thing to kind of keep in mind, that if you manage to get that outreach and get that connection, it can be something that pushes your application over the edge. You still have to apply, you still have to put your materials in, but just having someone say to them, hey, you should look at this person, it almost guarantees that you're going to get, at least in front of the hiring manager, your application materials or on the screening call with the recruiter. And so that's like a real tangible thing that you can try to do to help the rest of your process. Um, and I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially if you're a junior candidate, maybe you're coming right out of school, and you haven't worked at a startup before, a lot of startups have incentive programs for employees to recommend people for referrals. So like they might get $1,000 if that person gets hired. So there's some real stakes in it for them to want to help you as well. So don't get too shy about reaching out to people. Ask them if they want a 5-minute call with you, or or like if you can bother them just for like a little bit of time, or want their advice about how their career is going. Or people love to talk about themselves. That was something that Lachlan said, that people love to talk about themselves, and like giving them a platform to kind of hype them up and let them know that they're someone that you're looking up to is like a great entry point. So I think keeping in mind that not only is it just a good feeling to kind of help someone, like I, at the last company I worked for, I got like 4 people hired, partly because there was a incentive, but the other part was that it was just a good feeling to help somebody in their journey. So don't sort of uh discredit people's human nature to want to help others when they have a job. I think that that's real. But also don't discredit the fact that they could actually get something out of it themselves. So um, try to keep that in mind, that maybe you're not bothering someone, maybe you're actually kind of helping them with their own goals. And then I'm just looking at these questions. So that kind of answered Pranchal's question. Should I, and if so, how should I reach out to recruiters? Yeah, I don't think I'm the authority to say exactly how you should reach out. I think we've had some really great people talk about this. I have a couple help articles that have kind of summarized their tips, so I'll make sure to include it in our follow-up email. And I'll make sure to link those too as well. And I'll just put in the chat right now, just like the general link to the Ask a Recruiter YouTube playlist. And you'll see it pop up. There's only so many videos there. You'll see the ones that are about referrals and how to make those connections. And I just recommend watching them, but it has
Um,
real impact.
I'd like to plug one more thing, which
Yeah.
is there's someone, the founder and CEO of a site called interviewing.io.
Oh,
Her name
right.
is Aileen Lerner, and she has a blog that is really, really good. She's like one of my favorite people to read in this space, in the industry, in the hiring industry. She's very no nonsense, tells it like it is, and has very good insight on like what's effective and what isn't. As someone who's worked in recruiting, someone who now is a founder of one of these companies, and as someone who's been a hiring manager. So like I just wanted to point out, I'm going to drop a link to 2 articles in particular. The one links to the other one, actually. The resume, why resume writing is snake oil, um, links to how to get in the door at top companies, cold outreach to hiring managers. So it's just like, I think the biggest takeaway there is, please, you should read it, because it's not, for John's questions, it's probably not worth it to reach out to recruiters. I mean, do it if you want, but it's more impactful to reach out to hiring managers.
Yes.
But also, it's not impactful to reach out to hiring managers if you don't do it the right way. And Aileen has like really, really, really good strategies as someone who is a hiring manager, right? And she says she gives bad examples, which is basically like, hey, I'm here's basically my resume in email format. Like that's not good. But like her top, my top takeaway from that was like try to relate to why you resonate with this company, or in particular what this hiring manager, if you can, if they have a blog like Aileen does, right? Try to resonate, try to relate to that in particular. And another, she calls out other things too, which is like how to stand out, like doing side projects and stuff. It's one way to make side projects actually meaningful, is do it in such a way that points at that company, or like uses the company's AI, or maybe like redesigning their front end or something. It's just like, hey, I really care about this company's success or something like that, right? So really, I think the takeaway there is like, if you're going to reach out to a hiring manager, do it the right way. And it's a lot of work, totally. So this kind of goes, I saw a question in the chat earlier, which is like, how can you possibly make 100 companies think that you care about them in particular? You probably can't. You can use AI, use your writing samples as a way to get ChatGPT to sound more like you. By all means, do that. But for, let's just say like 10 of those you actually really care about, do stuff like this, you know? Um, do the customization, actually write it yourself, and actually do reach out to hiring managers in this particularly compelling way.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think yeah, I think you have to pick and choose what you want to put that extra effort into. That makes sense to me. One thing that uh, I'd add, just because it kind of sparked in my brain while you were talking, is that I also help edit our other YouTube series, which is interviews with founders, and they're talking about work culture and how they hire and what's important to them. And a thing that's come up in multiple founders talking about like what stands out to them with candidates is people who come to their interviews or come with their applications, and they actually tell the people hiring what they would like to solve for that company. So if you like really dig into the company and like make a pitch for what you would like to add to that space, you don't have to say like your thing is broken and I want to fix it. Like more like where you think it's going, what you've analyzed about it, what you think you could improve. Like it shows a real care for that company and that you're not kind of giving them something generic. You're going to come into the job with ideas and like already generating, you know, some sort of passion for what that role is. And that was something I heard like in different kind of forms during those interviews when they were talking about what stood out in candidates. Oh, we're getting really close to time. The last question that we had was about job scams, which also came up in the chat. So Nathan wanted me to field this question, I think, but feel free to add in, Nathan, if you've got anything you want to add. But like it's kind of a general question. Are there fake job posts on Wellfound like there are on Indeed and LinkedIn? And the short answer is yes, like it happens. Like it happens on all job platforms. The being a job seeker is a vulnerable position like lots of other things on the internet, and it is a place where things like this happen. But I think that there's a few things to say here. One is that sometimes there's assumptions about job scams. Like we had someone in the chat talk about what about jobs that, sorry, I'm paraphrasing because I can't find it right now, but about like jobs that ghost or companies that are ghosting candidates. And um, while some may be legitimately scams, and I'm going to talk about how we mitigate that at Wellfound in a minute, some might be that they accidentally left their ATS connected to Wellfound and they don't actually manage it. Or they are completely overwhelmed with the amount of applications that they have and they actually just like couldn't manage getting back to them. We've got kind of a negligent recruiter. Like there are lots of different reasons that it might feel like you're being ghosted or that you've been ghosted, but they're legitimate reasons. They don't actually mean somebody is scamming you. And so for that one, it's a little bit more gray. But that doesn't mean we don't do anything. Like when we get reports that a company is ghosting candidates, we reach out to them. We talk with them. Alejandro and like we have a bunch of people on our team are focused on trust and safety across Wellfound, and we mitigate a lot of these reports that we get from candidates about like behaviors that aren't explicit bad actors, if you know what I mean. So like in those gray zones, we do a lot to try to see if we can get them to improve, if they will pay attention to what's going on or take their job posting down when they're really done with it and all that kind of stuff. So we do those things to mitigate. And then as far as like just like job scams in general, we have a whole trust and safety or moderation team at our company. We have triggers that are built precisely and like based on like lots of different data points and information. I'm not going to go into them because I probably shouldn't talk about them all publicly. And I think Megan would agree that we don't want to tell all our secrets, but we have lots of triggers that we've built in to recognize when some of these people are using our platform. We review every first job that every company in our system posts to see if it's a legitimate job, it connects to a real company, it connects to a real person. We're able to verify and like use many different signals to make sure that those are real people. We do, of course, like also ask for user reports. So we have like a reporting portal and like links that you can use. If anything seems fishy, you can let us know. And we are manually, personally, myself and other people on our team are looking at it. So Nathan thought that was really important to go over. We don't usually talk about it because it's just like sort of the brass tacks of having a marketplace like this, but there are real people that actually look at these things trying to protect you and we really care about it. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize here was just that you can reach out to us. Like all the people at talent@wellfound.com, they're just the people who are on this call plus a few more. So if you have any questions, something doesn't feel right, you're not sure about it, don't just apply. Like don't just not apply either. Like reach out to us and have us look. Well, I'd be happy to look at anybody's inquiry or hesitation or this looks a little bit weird and take a look, and you might be right, or I might be able to see, for example, if you're like, this company's ghosting everybody, I don't think they're looking at anything. I might be able to look at their applications and see their match rate and see that actually they're just being really selective and it's an assumption that they're ghosting. So we can actually look at that stuff and kind of get back to you and help you out with interpreting some of the things that you're seeing online. I'd happily look at a different job post if I can help with it too, because it's a scary thing to be applying to jobs when you're especially when you're, trying to make sure that you're focused on real things. So I'm happy to help with that. I hope that helps explain. I feel like I'm going fast because we've got 1 minute left. But before we go, uh, I'm just going to take a quick look at the questions that we have here. Yeah, it looks like we didn't have too many more questions after the ones. I tried to answer some of the ones in the chat. And what I'll do is I've got a copy of the chat. I'll try to make sure that I answer some of these questions in the follow-up email with some resources. And then also we have a Discord channel, and Alejandro is going to put a link into the chat. So I'm going to jump into the Discord channel, or I'm kind of always got it up. So if you want to ask those questions in the general chat or the webinar discussion channel, I'll try to answer it async there. I feel a bit bad that we totally ran out of time for live questions, but I also am so thankful to Nathan. You've done an amazing job with all the data and the research that you did, and I think it was worth our while to go over that. So thank you so much, Nathan. And then the last call is, can you please fill out our survey, everybody? I'd love to know, especially because this session, the format was different. I'd love to have some feedback on it, good or bad. If you would prefer more of one part or less of another, any of that kind of stuff, that'll help us improve these in the future. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. If anyone, has questions, Discord is a good place. If you want to just email me, it's nathand@angel.co. If you send it to nathan@angel.co, someone else will get it. He's another guy. He's really cool though. But yeah, I'm an open book, happy to answer questions, happy to look into data if you're curious about it. Happy to field any feedback. Let me know what's working, what's not. Yeah, we're here to help.
Yeah, yeah, we are. Thanks, Nathan. And thank you everyone for joining. Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.